I never imagined that learning Russian in secret, there in the silence of my nights, would change the course of my life. I only did it to occupy my mind after retirement, since my son and my daughter-in-law always treated me like someone who understands nothing, and it worked. They really believed I was just a distracted old man incapable of catching anything. Until the day I went to help my son resolve an important matter, something that would affect my life too, and my daughter-in-law started conversing in Russian with him, thinking I did not understand a single word. I stayed quiet, feigning ignorance, until I heard clearly what she was plotting. In that instant, I felt my heart race. My own son, influenced by her, discussing how they could leave me out of everything, how they could deceive me, how they could take what was mine without me noticing. I stood there, listening to every detail, every phrase, every plan, and it was there, in that moment, that I finally saw the truth about them, and about me. From there, everything changed, because when you discover what they really think of you, you are never the same again. My name is Robert Miller. I am 67 years old, and I have worked all my life as a businessman in the construction sector here in the city. I was not born rich. My father was a bricklayer, and my mother sold food at the market. I learned from a young age that money does not come alone, that every dollar has to be sweated for, that every brick of a fortune is placed with calloused hands and intact pride. I built my company from zero. I started with an old truck and 2 employees. I worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night. Bids, contracts, negotiations. I broke my back lifting beams when we were short on people. I burned my skin under the August sun supervising sites. I lost friends for not having time. I lost my wife, Mary, for the same reason. She passed away 12 years ago from a heart problem that the doctors could not explain well. I believe it was from loneliness, from seeing me always arrive late, from dining alone so many nights. After she left, my only reason to keep going was my son, Richard. I gave him everything. The best private school, university in the Ivy League, a position in the company as soon as he graduated. I bought his house when he married Elena, a huge residence in the upscale suburbs with a pool and garden. I gifted him a German car. I opened all the doors that took me 30 years to open, and he, instead of being grateful, started seeing me as a nuisance. It did not happen all at once. It was little by little. First, he stopped calling me Dad and started calling me Robert in company meetings. Then he started arriving late to family gatherings. After that, he stopped inviting me to important dinners. I justified him. He is busy, I told myself. He is building his own life. But the truth is that I was blind. Elena arrived in his life 8 years ago. She is Russian. Tall, blonde, elegant. She speaks English with an accent that many find charming. To me, it never seemed so. From the first day, I noticed something strange in her gaze. A coldness, a way of smiling that did not reach her eyes. But Richard was in love, and I did not want to be the father who ruins his son's happiness. I was wrong. Since they got married, Elena started changing things. First, she convinced Richard that I was too traditional in the company, that my methods were outdated, that they needed to modernize. I accepted. I let Richard take more decisions. I wanted him to feel important, to know that I trusted him. Then she started suggesting that I should rest more, that at my age it was no longer necessary for me to go to the office every day, that they could handle everything. I accepted that too. I retired partially. I started going only twice a week. I signed documents, reviewed reports, but I was no longer in the day-to-day operations. And there started my biggest mistake. I started disappearing from my own life. Family scenes became uncomfortable. Elena spoke in Russian with Richard in front of me. They laughed, commented on things. And I, like a fool, smiled and nodded, pretending I did not mind not understanding. Richard looked at me with pity sometimes, other times with annoyance, as if I were a museum piece that no longer fit in the modern decoration of his life. One day, 2 years ago, I was at home watching television. It was a Sunday afternoon, alone, as always, and I thought, this is what is left. This is the prize after 40 years of work. It was then that I decided to do something different, something that would save me from becoming invisible. I went online and looked for language classes. I do not know why I chose Russian. Maybe because Elena spoke it and I wanted to understand what she said when she laughed with Richard. Maybe because I needed a challenge, something that would make me feel alive again. I hired a private tutor, an older man, Ukrainian, who had lived in the city for 20 years. His name was Dmitri. He came to my house 3 times a week. He taught me with patience, grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary. At first it was difficult. My brain was no longer that of a young man. But I insisted. I studied every night. I listened to podcasts in Russian. I watched movies with subtitles. And I never told anyone. Not Richard, not Elena, not my friends. It was my secret, my small act of silent rebellion. After 2 years, I could already understand complete conversations. I did not speak perfectly, but I understood almost everything, and I kept pretending I knew nothing, because something inside me told me that this knowledge was going to serve me someday, and I was right. 3 weeks ago, Richard called me on the phone. It was weird because he almost never called me anymore. I was always the one looking for him. "Dad, I need you to come to the house tomorrow afternoon. There is something important to discuss." His voice sounded serious, formal, as if he were talking to a client, not his father. "It is about the company and about some properties. It is better that we talk in person." I did not like the tone, but I said yes. The next day, I dressed in a gray suit, put on my gold watch, the one Mary gave me on our 20th anniversary, and drove to the suburbs. The house was impeccable as always. Elena opened the door. She wore a tight white dress and heels that made noise against the marble floor. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. Cold. Protocol. "Hello, Robert. Come in. Richard is in the study." I entered. The house smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Everything was in its place. Everything perfect. Too perfect. As if it were a stage and not a home. Richard was sitting behind his large dark wood desk. He had a laptop open and several documents ordered in front of him. He greeted me with a nod. "Sit down, Dad." I sat in one of the chairs facing the desk. Elena remained standing by the window, looking out towards the garden. Richard began to speak. He explained to me that there was a huge investment opportunity in Arizona, a real estate development project, luxury towers, shopping centers, something that could triple the value of the company in 5 years, but they needed immediate liquidity. They needed to sell some properties that I had in my name, 3 lots in the city, a building downtown, an industrial warehouse. "It is the best decision, Dad. We trust this project. We already have interested investors, but we need to move fast." I looked him in the eyes. I looked for something. A trace of the boy I took to the hospital when he fell off the swing. Of the young man who cried in my arms when he was fired from his first job. I found nothing. "And why do you need to sell my properties?" I asked. "The company has resources." Richard sighed, as if I were a child who does not understand things. "Because those properties are in your name, Dad, and because we already spoke with the lawyers. Legally, it is more convenient for you to sell them and for the money to go directly into the project. That way we avoid unnecessary taxes." I nodded slowly. Something did not add up, but I did not say anything yet. And how much time do I have to think about it? Richard exchanged a look with Elena. She was still standing by the window, motionless like a statue. "Actually, Dad, we need you to sign. The papers are already ready. The notary is coming tomorrow." That was when I felt the first stab of alarm, but I stayed quiet. I have always been good at keeping silent when necessary. "Let me read the documents first." Richard nodded and passed me a thick folder. I started reviewing. Sales contracts, powers of attorney, legal clauses written in that language that only lawyers understand. While I read, Elena approached Richard and said something in a low voice. In Russian. "Are you sure he will sign?" Richard answered her, also in Russian, without looking at her. "He understands nothing. He will sign." I felt something cold run down my back, but I kept my face neutral. I kept reading the papers, as if I had heard nothing. Elena continued speaking. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but I heard her perfectly. "When he signs, everything will be ours. He will not even understand that he lost control." Richard laughed softly, a dry laugh, without humor. "He is old. He trusts me. It is easy." That was when everything stopped. The world, my breathing, time, my own son, my only family, the boy I carried on my shoulders, the young man I taught to drive, the man I gave everything to. He was betraying me, and he was doing it with a coldness I never imagined existed in him. I closed the folder slowly. I looked at both of them. Richard watched me with that expression of fake patience that doctors use with difficult patients. Elena looked at me with something worse, contempt disguised as courtesy. "I need time to review this with my lawyer," I said calmly. Richard frowned. "Dad, I already told you we need to act fast. The notary comes tomorrow. Then the notary will have to wait." I stood up. I took the folder. Richard stood up too, annoyed. "I do not understand why you complicate things. It is a safe investment. We are including you." I looked directly into his eyes. I wanted to tell him everything I had just heard. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask him how it was possible that he saw me like that, but I did not do it, because something inside me, something I built in 40 years of business, told me, "Wait. Observe and then act. I am going to review it. I will call you in a few days." I left the house without saying goodbye to Elena. I got into my truck. I closed the door. And I sat there, with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. I had just discovered that my son saw me as an obstacle, that his wife considered me a stupid old man, that between the two of them they had planned to strip me of everything I built, and they thought I would not notice. I started the engine and drove back to my house. During the whole way, the words in Russian resonated in my head like a bitter echo. "He understands nothing. He is old. It is easy." I arrived home. I poured myself a whiskey. I sat in the living room armchair, and for the first time in many years I cried, not from sadness, from rage, because it hurts when they betray you. But it hurts 1,000 times more when the person who betrays you is the person you loved most in life. That night, I did not sleep. I stayed awake, thinking, reviewing every detail of the conversation, analyzing the documents, making calculations, and taking a decision. If they believed I was an old man easy to deceive, they were very wrong. I built an empire from zero. I survived economic crises, unfair competition, traitorous partners. I was not going to let my own son take from me what cost me my entire life. But I was not going to act on impulse either. No, I was going to do what I always did in business: observe, plan, and execute with precision. The next day I called George, my trusted lawyer for 25 years. I asked him to come to my house. When he arrived, I told him everything. I showed him the documents. I explained what I had heard. George read with attention. Then he looked at me with a grave expression. "Robert, if you sign this, you lose control of all those properties, and according to these clauses, you also cede rights over strategic decisions of the company. Basically, you would be giving up your power." "I know. And what do you want to do?" I looked at him fixedly. "I want to play their game, but I want to win." George smiled. I knew that smile. It was the same one he put on when we found a way to win a complicated case. Then, "We are going to need a plan." And so it all began. During the following days, George and I worked in silence. We reviewed every document of the company, every contract, every property, every bank account. And we discovered something interesting. Although Richard was the CEO, I was still the majority shareholder. I had 55% of the shares. He had 30. Elena, surprisingly, had 15. That last part surprised me. I did not remember giving shares to her. "It was 2 years ago," George explained. "You signed a corporate restructuring. Here is your signature." I looked at the document. It was my signature, but I did not remember reading that paper with attention. Probably Richard put it among other routine documents, and I signed without reviewing. My first mistake, and the last. We also discovered that Richard had been moving company money into personal accounts. Nothing illegal, but definitely suspicious. Large amounts. George investigated further and found something revealing. He was paying in advance for some land in Arizona, in the name of a new company. A company where he and Elena were the only partners. "They are setting up their own business with your company's money," George said. "And the plan is for you to sell your properties to inject more capital into that project. But that project is not the family company's. It is theirs. I felt a mixture of fury and astonishment. How had my son come to this? At what moment did he become someone capable of stealing from his own father? What can I do? George leaned back in his chair. He clasped his hands. Legally, you can do many things. You can block the sale of the properties. You can remove him as CEO. You can audit him. You can sue him. I do not want to sue him. He is my son. Then what do you want? I stayed in silence for a moment, thinking, remembering. I want him to learn. I want him to understand that actions have consequences. I want him to feel what it feels like when someone you trust betrays you. George nodded slowly. That is more difficult, but not impossible. During the next week, I set up my strategy. I called Richard and told him I had decided to sign the documents, that I trusted him, that if he thought it was a good idea, I supported him. Richard sounded relieved on the phone. Thanks, Dad. You are not going to regret it. This is going to be big. I know, son. I know. We agreed to meet at the notary 3 days later, but before that appointment, I did something else. I gathered the other minority shareholders of the company, 3 old partners, friends of mine for decades. I explained the situation to them. I showed them the money movements. I made them see that Richard was using the company as his personal piggy bank. They were outraged. They offered me their total support. I also spoke with the managers of the main construction sites. I asked them to keep me informed of everything, not to take orders from Richard without consulting me first, and, finally, I hired a private investigator. I asked him to follow Elena. I wanted to know what else she was hiding. What he discovered froze my soul even more than the words in Russian. Elena was not only manipulating Richard, she had a lover, a Russian businessman who lived in Miami. They saw each other every time she traveled alone, and, according to the photos the investigator showed me, the relationship was serious. Richard had no idea. My son was not only betraying me, he was being betrayed too. And I, the old man they considered a fool, was the only one who knew the whole truth. When the day of the appointment at the notary arrived, I dressed in my best suit. I put on Mary's watch, and I drove to the notary's office with the calm of a general going to war. Richard and Elena were already there. He wore a black suit, she, a navy blue dress. Both were smiling, confident, sure of their victory. The notary received us in his office. An older man, serious, professional. He greeted us and began to review the documents. I sat down, crossed my hands, and waited. The notary began reading the documents aloud. His voice was monotone, precise, legal. He spoke of clauses, of assignments, of transfers. Richard nodded from time to time. Elena looked out the window with a bored expression, as if this were just a minor errand before going shopping. I watched them in silence, studying every gesture, every look, every breath. The notary reached the part where I had to sign. He passed me a heavy, expensive pen. Mr. Miller, if you agree with the terms, you can sign here, here, and here. I took the pen. I held it over the first space, and then I spoke. Before signing, I have a question. Richard looked at me with barely contained impatience. What is it, Dad? This new company in Arizona, the one you are going to capitalize with the sale of my properties, whose name is it in? An uncomfortable silence fell. Richard exchanged a quick look with Elena. It is in the name of a subsidiary of our family company. Lie. The word fell like a stone in a calm pond. Richard blinked. What? I took a folder out of my briefcase. I put it on the notary's desk. I opened it. Inside were documents, articles of incorporation, bank movements, everything printed, everything organized, everything backed up. This company is called Elena Miller Developments. It was incorporated 8 months ago. The partners are you and your wife, 50% each. It has nothing to do with Miller Construction, our family company. The color disappeared from Richard's face. Elena stopped looking out the window. Her blue eyes locked on me with a coldness that now she no longer tried to hide. Dad, can I explain? I do not need explanations. I need the truth. Were you planning to use the money from my properties to capitalize your personal company? It is not what it seems. Oh, no? Because I have the bank statements here. In the last 6 months, you have transferred over $150,000 from Miller Construction to Elena Miller Developments, without authorization from the Board of Shareholders, without informing me. Richard stood up. He was pale, nervous. He tried to maintain control, but I saw him trembling slightly. Those transfers were loans. I was going to pay them back. When? After selling my properties and keeping everything? It is not like that. I raised my hand, a gesture I used in company meetings when someone was talking too much. Richard fell silent immediately. That gesture still worked. Sit down. He hesitated, but he sat. I looked at the notary. I am not going to sign these documents. They are fraudulent. They are designed to strip me of my assets under the pretext of a family investment that in reality benefits only two people. The notary cleared his throat uncomfortably. In that case, Mr. Miller, the transaction cannot proceed. Correct. I stood up. I put away my documents. I looked at Richard. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning I expect you at my house. We have to talk. Dad, wait. Tomorrow at 9. I left the notary's office without looking back. I walked to my truck. I got in. I closed the door. And there, in the silence of the vehicle, I allowed my heart to beat wildly. It had been hard. It had been painful. But it had been necessary. That night, Richard called me 7 times. I did not answer. Elena sent me 3 messages. I read them, but did not reply. One said, "Robert, I think there was a misunderstanding." Another, "We should talk calmly." The last one, "Richard is very affected." I deleted the messages. At 9 o'clock sharp the next morning I heard the doorbell. I opened the door. Richard was there, alone, without Elena. He had dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired, defeated. "Come in." We entered the house. I offered him coffee. He rejected it. He sat in the armchair, hunched over with his hands between his knees. "Dad, I am sorry." I said nothing. I waited. "You are right. Everything you said yesterday is true. Elena and I set up that company. And yes, we were going to use the money from your properties to capitalize it. But it was not to rob you. It was to grow the business. So that we all won. Everyone except me, who was going to lose control of my assets." He looked down. I did not see it that way. I thought it was a good strategy. I sat in front of him. I looked at him intently. "Richard, do you know the difference between a good strategy and a betrayal?" He looked up. "The intention," I continued. "A good strategy is done with transparency, with consensus, with respect. A betrayal is done in secret, with deception, with contempt." His eyes filled with tears. I saw him fight to contain them. "I did not want you to think I was betraying you." "But you did." He broke. He started to cry. A grown man's cry. Of someone who realizes he messed up and does not know how to fix it. "I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry." Part of me wanted to hug him, tell him everything was fine, that I forgave him. But another part, the part that still heard those words in Russian, kept me firm. "Why did you do it?" He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Elena convinced me. She told me you were already old, that you did not understand how modern business worked, that it was better for me to take the important decisions. And I believed her. And what did you think? Did you really see me like that?" He hesitated. That doubt hurt me more than any word. "Sometimes, yes. Sometimes I thought your methods were outdated, that the company needed to change, that I could do it better." I nodded slowly. At least he was honest. "Richard, I am going to tell you something I learned in 40 years of business. Success is not measured by how modern you are. It is measured by the trust you generate. And you just lost mine." He remained silent, waiting for the final blow. "Starting today, we are going to make changes in the company. First, you are going to return every dollar you transferred to your personal company. Second, we are going to do a complete audit of all accounts. Third, I return to being the CEO. You become vice president. Dad, it is not negotiable. Either you accept or you resign and go work at your company with Elena." He stayed silent for a long while, processing, calculating. "I accept." "Good. And there is something else." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Elena can no longer have shares in the company." "What? You cannot do that." "Yes, I can." The shares she has were part of a restructuring I signed without reading well. My lawyer already reviewed everything. That transfer can be reversed due to lack of transparency in the operation. I can start a legal process. Or Elena can voluntarily cede the shares and we avoid a scandal. Richard stood up, furious. You are attacking my wife. No. I am protecting my assets. She is not family, Richard. She is a partner who sneaked in through the back door. And now she has to leave. She is my wife, and that does not give her the right to my company. We stared at each other. Father and son, two men fighting for control. For pride. For reason. I am not going to let you do that, he said with a trembling voice. Then choose. Your wife or the company. It was cruel, I know, but it was necessary, because Richard needed to understand that decisions have consequences, that loyalty is not negotiable. He left without saying more. He left my house, slamming the door. I heard his car start violently and drive away. I remained alone in the living room, looking out the window, feeling the weight of what I had just done. That afternoon, Elena called me. I answered. Robert, we need to talk. Her voice was hard, without the sweet tone she normally used. We have nothing to talk about, Elena. You are making a mistake. Richard is your only son. Do you really want to lose him over this? I am not going to lose him. I am saving him. From what? From you. A tense silence followed. You know nothing about me. I know more than you think. I pulled my ace out of my sleeve. I know, for example, that you have a lover in Miami, a Russian businessman named Viktor Sokolov. I know you have seen him 4 times in the last 3 months. I know you are planning to open a business together in Florida. The silence became absolute. I could hear her breathing on the other side of the line. How? I am old, Elena, but I am not stupid. I hung up. The following weeks were hell. Richard did not speak to me. Elena hired a lawyer to fight for her shares. The other partners of the company started asking what was happening. Employees murmured in the hallways, but I remained firm. I hired the best law firm in the city. I gathered all the evidence. I documented every irregularity. And I waited. The audit revealed worse things than I imagined. Richard had not only transferred money to his personal company, he had also paid personal expenses with company funds. Trips, restaurants, clothes, Elena's car, everything charged to Miller Construction. When I showed him the results, he turned pale. I did not know this was wrong. Of course you knew. That is why you hid it. Elena told me it was normal, that all businessmen do it. Elena lied to you, like she has lied to you about many things. I put the investigators' photos on the table. Richard with Elena at a dinner. Elena leaving a hotel in Miami. Elena hugging Viktor Sokolov. Elena kissing Viktor Sokolov. Richard took the photos with trembling hands. He looked at them one by one. His face went from shock to disbelief and then to something worse, to the deep pain of someone who discovers his world was a lie. It cannot be. It is. He dropped the photos. He covered his face with his hands. All this time, she used you. She convinced you to betray me. She distanced you from me. And while you did what she wanted, she was with another man. Richard collapsed. He cried like I had not seen him cry since he was a child. A heartbreaking cry. Of humiliation. Of shame. Of loss. I stayed there, sitting in front of him, watching my son break into pieces. And although part of me wanted to comfort him, another part knew this was necessary. That sometimes love hurts. That sometimes teaching means letting them fall. What am I going to do, Dad? It was the first time in years he called me Dad with that tone, with that crack in the voice that only a son uses with his father. You are going to make decisions, as a man, as a businessman, as a person. I do not know if I can. Of course you can. You are my son. And I did not raise a coward. He looked up. His eyes were red, swollen. Do you forgive me? The question hung in the air, loaded with hope, with fear. Not yet, I said with honesty, but I can start trying if you start earning it. He nodded slowly. He wiped his face. What do you want me to do? First, confront Elena. Ask for explanations. Make the decision you have to make. Second, return the money to the company. Everything. Until the last dollar. Third, work Show me you can be the man I thought you were. And if I can't, then you look for another path. But not in my company. It was hard, but it was the truth. Richard left my house that afternoon with the photos in his hand and the world crumbling around him. I did not know what happened during the next 3 days. He did not call me. He did not look for me. Until the 4th day he appeared at my door. Early. At 6 in the morning, I opened. He was there with a small suitcase and a face of not having slept in days. I separated from Elena. I let him in. I made him coffee. We sat in the kitchen. I showed her the photos. She denied everything. She said they were setups, that you were manipulating me, that Victor was just a friend. But I did not believe her anymore. I confronted her about the company, about the money, about everything. And then she changed. She took off the mask. She told me I was a failure, that without her I was nothing, that my dad was right. I was just a rich kid playing businessman. He took a sip of coffee. I asked her to leave the house. She laughed. She told me the house was in her name too, that I could not kick her out. So I left. I have been in a hotel these days, thinking, processing. And what conclusion did you reach? He looked at me with tired but lucid eyes. That you were right, in everything, that I let myself be manipulated, that I betrayed the most important thing I have, that I lost my way. I put my hand over his. You just veered off, but the path is still there. Can I stay here a few days, while I fix everything legal about the divorce? This is your home. It always was. He stayed silent for a moment. Then he spoke with a broken voice. Forgive me, Dad. Please. I hugged him. Tight. Like when he was a child and was afraid of the dark. I forgive you, son. I forgive you. But even though I forgave him, things did not go back to how they were before. They couldn't, because something had broken. Something that would take time to rebuild. The following months were intense. Richard worked harder than ever. He arrived before everyone. He left after everyone. He learned every process, every account, every detail of the company. And little by little I started seeing the man I always wanted him to be. Elena fought the divorce with ferocity. She asked for half of everything. The house, the cars, a millionaire pension. But her mistake was having signed a prenup. My lawyer had suggested it to Richard before the wedding, and although Elena had fought it, she finally had signed. That document left her with almost nothing. When the judge gave the sentence, Elena lost. She stayed only with what she brought to the marriage, her clothes and some furniture. The house remained for Richard, the cars too. And the company shares, which should never have been hers, returned to the family. The day they signed the divorce, Richard came to my house. He brought a bottle of aged tequila. It is over, Dad. We poured 2 glasses. We toasted. To new beginnings. To new beginnings. We drank in silence. Father and son. Partners. Family. But although the divorce had ended, my plan had not. Because the most important part was still missing. 3 months after the divorce, Richard had changed, not only in the way he worked, but in the way he saw me. He was no longer that distant man who treated me like just another employee. Now he consulted me on decisions. He asked for opinions. He listened to me with attention. One afternoon, while we were reviewing some contracts in my study, he said something that surprised me. Dad, I want you to know something. During all these months I have been thinking about how I became so blind, and I realized something. I stopped listening to you because Elena made me believe that listening to you was being weak, that asking you for advice was admitting I could not do it alone. I put the papers aside. Richard, asking for advice is never weakness. It is intelligence. The most successful men I know are the ones who know when to ask. I know that now, but back then I didn't, and that is why I almost lost everything. He stayed silent for a moment. Then he added, There is something I have never asked you. How did you learn Russian? You never mentioned you were studying. I smiled. It was time to tell him the whole truth. Do you remember when Elena and you started speaking in Russian in front of me? Yes, it made me feel invisible, as if it wasn't even worth trying for me to understand. So I decided to learn, not to confront you, but to not feel so alone. Richard frowned. When did you start? 2 years ago, I hired a private tutor, Dmitri, a Ukrainian living in the city. So, when Elena and I spoke in Russian in front of you, you understood everything. His face turned pale. My God, everything we said, everything. He stood up, walked to the window. He stayed there, looking towards the garden, processing. Why didn't you tell us? Because I needed to know the truth. If I had told you I understood Russian, you would have changed your behavior. You would have been more careful, and I never would have discovered what you really thought of me. That day at the notary? Was that the day you heard something specific? No, it was before, at your house, when I went to review the documents for the supposed investment. I told him everything, every word I had heard, every phrase in Russian, every derogatory comment. Richard listened in silence, and with every phrase I repeated, his expression became darker. When I finished, he let himself fall into the chair. He looked devastated. I said those things. God, Dad, I really said you were old and understood nothing. Yes, I cannot believe I was so cruel. You were, but you were also being manipulated. That is not an excuse. No, it is not. But it is a mitigating factor. He covered his face with his hands. How can you even look at me after that? I stood up. I approached him. I put my hand on his shoulder. Because you are my son. Because you made a mistake, but you are paying for it. Because the man you were then is not the man you are now. He looked up. His eyes were damp. I do not deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, but you have it anyway, because that is how a father's love works. We hugged, and in that hug, I felt something repair itself. Not entirely, but enough to move forward. The following months, the company started to grow again. Richard implemented some of the modern ideas he had wanted to apply, but this time, with my guidance and approval, we digitized processes. We improved efficiency. We won important bids, and I, little by little, started to delegate again. Not because I was getting old, but because I finally trusted that my son was ready. But there was something else I needed to do, something not finished. Elena. After the divorce, she stayed in the city a couple of months. She tried to maintain herself in social circles, but people avoided her. The wives of businessmen no longer invited her to their events. Those who flattered her before now ignored her. That is how society works. When you have power, everyone wants to be close. When you lose it, they disappear. Finally, she left. Or so we thought. One day, 6 months after the divorce, my lawyer called me urgently. Robert, I need you to come to my office. There is something you have to see. I went immediately. George was waiting for me with a grave expression. On his desk were documents and an open laptop. What happened? Elena is attempting something. Something big. He showed me the screen. It was a business news portal. The headline read, Russian businesswoman sues construction company for discrimination and fraud. I read the article. Elena had given an interview to several media outlets. She claimed I had manipulated her to renounce her rights, that I had used my influence to take away her company shares, that Richard had been forced by me to divorce her, that it had all been a plan to get rid of her, because I never accepted my son marrying a foreigner. It was a complete lie, but it was very well constructed. It had dates. It had testimonies from people who supposedly had witnessed things. It had altered documents. Is this legal? I asked. It is a smear campaign. She is looking to pressure you publicly so you give her a financial settlement. If this escalates, it can affect the company's reputation. Some clients could get nervous. And what can we do? Countersue for defamation. But that would take time. And meanwhile, the damage would be done. I stood thinking, looking at the screen, reading Elena's lies. And then something occurred to me. George, do you remember we have security recordings in the company? Yes. The cameras also record audio in the meeting rooms, right? Correct. I need you to search for all the recordings of the meetings where Elena was, especially those where she and Richard spoke in Russian. George understood immediately. He smiled. That is brilliant. We spent 3 days reviewing recordings. And we found gold. Conversations where Elena convinced Richard to hide information from shareholders. Moments where she suggested strategies to push me out of the company. Fragments where she mocked me in Russian, thinking the cameras only captured video. But they captured everything. I hired a certified translator. I asked him to transcribe every conversation in Russian, to certify it legally. And then, with all that evidence, we did something Elena never expected. We published a press release. It was not long. It was not complicated. We simply told the truth, that Elena had manipulated company information, that she had tried to strip us of properties, that she had lied about her role in the company, and that we had proof. We attached fragments of the transcripts, fragments where she spoke of Victor, her lover, fragments where she planned how to keep the majority of the assets in the divorce, fragments where she referred to Richard as a useful idiot, and to me as the old nuisance. The impact was immediate. The media that had published Elena's version now published our response. Social media exploded. People commented. Some defended her, but the majority criticized her. And then something happened I did not expect. Other people started to talk. An employee of a luxury boutique posted on Facebook that Elena owed her money for clothes she never paid for. An accountant who had worked briefly with her revealed she had asked him to falsify tax documents. A woman in Miami shared photos of Elena with Victor, confirming the romance. The narrative changed. She was no longer the victim. She was the villain. 3 days after the statement, Elena called me. "Robert, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. Please, withdraw the statement. This is destroying me. You started it. I made a mistake. I admit it. But this is too much. It is not too much. It is fair. You are ruining my life. You tried to ruin mine first. And my son's." She stayed quiet for a moment. Then her voice changed. It became cold, calculating. "If you do not withdraw the statement, I am going to reveal things about Richard, things that are going to sink him." "Like what?" "Things from his past, things he did when we were together, things that can get him in legal trouble." "Go ahead. Do it." "What?" "Do it. Reveal whatever you want. Because if there is something I learned in these months, it is that secrets only have power when you hide them. If Richard did something bad, we will face it. Together. As a family." Elena hung up. That night I spoke with Richard. I told him about Elena's threat. "Dad, there is something I never told you." "What?" "When I was with Elena, she convinced me to do some things. Nothing illegal, but yes, questionable. Signing contracts without reading them well. Making deals with suppliers she recommended without investigating. Some of those companies turned out to be shells. How much money was lost? About $30,000. It was a considerable amount, but not catastrophic. Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid that you would not trust me anymore." I looked at him intently. "Richard, trust is not built by hiding mistakes. It is built by facing them." "I know, and that is why I am telling you now." "Good. Tomorrow you are going to prepare a complete report of everything that happened. We are going to document it, and if Elena makes it public, we will already have our version ready. Are you not furious?" "Of course I am furious, but I am more proud that you finally trust me." The next day, Richard prepared the report. He detailed every questionable transaction, every bad contract, every mistake. We reviewed it together, and we decided something radical. Publish it ourselves. We issued another statement, this time admitting the errors, explaining that Richard had been manipulated, but that he assumed responsibility, that the company had absorbed the losses, that we had implemented stricter controls so it would not happen again. It was a risky move, but it worked. People appreciated the honesty, clients valued the transparency, and competitors who thought to use this against us had no ammo because we had already fired first. Elena tried to make noise with the information, but it did not matter anymore. She had no power. She had no credibility. A week later, she left the country, back to Russia. Without money, without reputation, without anything. Richard and I were in the office when we found out. He looked out the window towards the city he loved so much. She left, yes. Do you think she will ever regret it? I don't know. But it is no longer our problem. He turned towards me. Thanks, Dad. Why? For not giving up on me. For teaching me that things can be fixed. For showing me that a father's love has no limits. I hugged him. You are my son. I will always fight for you. Months kept passing. The company kept growing. Richard kept maturing. And I, little by little, started letting go of control. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. 1 year after the divorce, Richard met someone new. A local woman, civil engineer, intelligent, humble, hardworking. Her name was Laura. The first time he introduced her to me, I was skeptical. After Elena, it was hard to trust. But Laura was different. Genuine, without masks. One afternoon, while we drank coffee in my house, she said something to me that I liked. "Mr. Miller, I want you to know that I am not here for Richard's money. I have my own company, my own income. I am with him because I love him, because I see in him a good man who made mistakes but learned from them. I am glad to hear that, Laura. And I want you to know something else. I respect what you built very much. Richard told me the whole story. What happened with Elena, how you saved him from himself. That speaks a lot about you as a father." I felt something warm in my chest, something I had not felt since Mary was alive. "Thank you, Laura, truly." 6 months later, Richard called me to his office. He was nervous. He had something in his hand. "Dad, I want to ask you something. Tell me." He took out a small box. Inside was a ring. "I am going to propose to Laura, but before doing so, I need your blessing." I stayed quiet a moment, looking at the ring, remembering. "Do you love her?" "With all my heart." "Does she make you a better person?" "Every day." "Did you learn from your mistakes?" "I hope so." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Then you have my blessing." His eyes filled with tears. "Thanks, Dad. But, Richard, there is something I need you to understand." "What?" "Marriage is not easy. It requires work. It requires communication. It requires respect. And above all, it requires that you never stop listening. To your wife, to your family, to your conscience. I know. Good. Because I do not want to see you lost again. I won't be. I promise you." The wedding was beautiful. Small. Intimate. Only close family and true friends. Laura looked radiant in her simple white dress. Richard looked happy, genuinely happy. When it was my turn to give the speech, I stood up. I looked at my son, at his new wife, at the guests. 2 years ago, I thought I had lost everything. My company, my son, my dignity. But it turns out I had not lost anything. I had only gained a lesson, that the most valuable things in life are not measured in properties or in money. They are measured in the people who stand by your side when everything collapses. I looked at Richard. "Son, you made mistakes, big mistakes. But you had the courage to face them, to change, to grow, and that makes me prouder than any business success." I raised my glass. "To new beginnings, to second chances, to the love that forgives and builds." Everyone toasted, and in that moment, I felt I had finally closed a cycle. But life always has a way of surprising you. 2 years after Richard and Laura's wedding, my life had found a quiet rhythm. The company ran better than ever. Richard was now a respected leader, not only by his employees, but by the entire construction industry in the city. And I, at my 70 years, had finally learned to enjoy my partial retirement without feeling invisible. Laura turned out to be more than a good wife for Richard. She was smart, with business vision, and, above all, she kept my son's feet on the ground. They visited me every Sunday. We ate together. We talked. We laughed. Something I had not done in years. One Sunday afternoon, while we shared a barbecue in my garden, Laura told me something that took me by surprise. "Mr. Miller, I have to tell you something." "What is it, dear?" She looked at Richard. He smiled and nodded. "I am pregnant." The world stopped for a second. Then, a wave of emotion flooded me. I was going to be a grandfather. I got up. I hugged them both. That is wonderful. You do not know how happy this makes me." Laura laughed, with tears in her eyes. "We wanted you to be the first to know." "The first?" "Yes, because you are the foundation of this family. Without you, none of this would exist." That night, after they left, I sat in my study with a glass of whiskey. I looked at Mary's photo on my desk. "We did it, love. Our son is going to be a father. I wish you were here to see it." The following months were of preparation. Richard and Laura arranged a room for the baby. I bought them everything they needed, although Laura insisted it was not necessary. "Mr. Miller, you already did too much for us. It is never too much for my grandson." "Granddaughter," Richard corrected with a smile. "They are going to be twins." "Twins?" "Yes, 2 girls." I felt my heart explode with happiness. 2 granddaughters, 2 new lives that would carry forward the Miller name. The day they were born was the most beautiful of my life since Mary left. I arrived at the hospital at 5 in the morning. Richard was nervous, pacing from one side to the other in the waiting room. Laura had gone into surgery for a scheduled C-section. "Relax, son. Everything is going to be fine." "I know, Dad, but I can't help being nervous. That is how this is. Love makes you vulnerable, makes you fear, but it also makes you stronger." 2 hours later, a nurse came out. "Miller family." We stood up immediately. "Congratulations. 2 healthy girls. Mom is also fine." Richard almost fainted from relief. I held him. Go meet your daughters." He entered the recovery room. I waited outside, giving them that private moment. 20 minutes later, he came out with 2 babies wrapped in pink blankets. "Dad, let me introduce you to Sophia and Valentina." I took them in my arms, one on each side. They were perfect, small, fragile, with closed eyes and clenched fists. "Hello, my loves. I am your grandfather, and I promise I will always take care of you." In that moment, I felt that everything made sense. All the years of work, all the sacrifices, all the battles, everything had been to reach this moment, to hold these 2 new lives and know that the future was secured. The first months were intense. Richard and Laura were exhausted with the twins. I went to their house every day. I helped them with what I could. I carried the girls, changed diapers, sang songs that Mary used to sing to Richard. And in those moments, seeing my son be a father, I realized something. He had broken the cycle of distance, the cycle of work over family, the cycle of mistakes I had committed with him. Richard was a present father, loving, patient, everything I was not in the beginning. One night, while I rocked Valentina to sleep, Richard sat next to me. "Dad, I want you to know something. Tell me, every time I hold my daughters, I think of you, of everything you did for me, and I regret having treated you so badly." "Don't think about that anymore. I have to think about it, because I do not want to make the same mistakes with you that I committed. You are not going to make them." "How do you know?" "Because you learned, and because you have something I did not have for many years. Perspective." "Perspective?" "Yes, the ability to see what really matters before it is too late." He stayed quiet a moment. Valentina fell asleep in my arms. I put her in her crib carefully. "Dad, there is something else I want to tell you." "What?" "Laura and I were talking. We want you to be the girls' godfather." "I am their grandfather. I do not need to be godfather. We know, but we want it to be official, that if something happens to us, they remain under your care." I was left speechless. "You trust me that much? More than anyone in the world?" I hugged him, tight. It would be an honor. The baptism was beautiful, small. In the same church where Mary and I got married, 45 years ago, the twins wore hand-embroidered white dresses. Laura was radiant. Richard was proud. And I, at my 72 years, felt more alive than ever. After the ceremony, there was a meal at my house. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone celebrating. At one moment I moved away to the garden. I needed a moment of peace, of reflection. I sat on a bench under the walnut tree that Mary had planted years ago. "Can I?" It was Laura. She sat next to me. "Of course, dear. I wanted to thank you, Mr. Miller." "Why?" "For everything. For accepting me into your family. For trusting me. For teaching Richard to be the man he is today. I did not teach anything. He learned alone. That is not true. He tells me everything. He tells me about Elena, about the mistakes he committed, about how you, instead of abandoning him, saved him. He is my son. What else was I going to do? Many parents would have abandoned him, disinherited him, punished him. But you chose to love him." I stayed quiet, feeling the weight of her words. "Laura, can I tell you something? Anything. When I discovered what Richard was doing, what Elena was planning, the first thing I felt was hate. I wanted to punish him. I wanted to hurt him. But then I realized something. Hate only destroys. Love builds. That is why you are a great man, Mr. Miller. I am not a great man. I am just a father who did not want to lose his son. Laura put her hand on mine. It is more than that. It is an example. For Richard, for me, and someday, for Sophia and Valentina. At that moment, Richard appeared with the twins in his arms. Do I interrupt something? Not at all, said Laura. I was just telling your dad how lucky we are. Richard sat on the other side. He passed Sophia to me. He held Valentina. Dad, remember when you asked me what I had learned from all this? Yes. I think I finally have the complete answer. What is it? I learned that family is not perfect, that we make mistakes, that we hurt each other. But I also learned that, if there is true love, there is always a way to return, to rebuild, to start again. I looked at Sophia asleep in my arms, then at Valentina in Richard's arms, then at Laura, then at my son. You know, Richard, when your mother died, I thought I no longer had reasons to continue, that the best of my life was over, but I was wrong. The best is just beginning. The four of us stayed there, sitting under the walnut tree, watching the sunset. A family, united, strong. Years kept passing. The twins grew. At 3 years old, they ran all over my house. At 5, they already called me Grandpa Robert, with that sweetness only children have. At 7, they asked me to tell them stories of when I was young, and I told them. I spoke of my father, the bricklayer, of my mother who sold food, of how I built my company from zero, of Mary and her infinite love, of the mistakes I made, of the lessons I learned. Sophia was the curious one. She always asked why, to everything. Valentina was the artist. She drew everything she saw. Both were brilliant. One day, Sophia asked me something that left me thinking. Grandpa, why does Dad never talk about our other grandma? She referred to Elena. I looked at Richard. He was there, in the living room, and heard the question. We looked at each other, without words, but understanding that this moment would arrive eventually. Come, Sophia, sit here. She sat on my lap. Valentina also approached. There are things in life that are difficult to explain. Sometimes people we love hurt us. And sometimes those people leave our lives, like when Grandma Mary died. No, my love. Grandma Mary left because she got sick, but she always loved us. There are other people who leave because they choose to leave, because they cannot stay. Did our other grandma choose to leave? Yes. Why? Richard approached. He knelt in front of the girls. Because sometimes adults make mistakes, big mistakes, and those mistakes distance us from the people we love. Did you make a mistake, Dad? Yes, I made many. And did Grandpa forgive you? Yes. And that is why we are all together? Yes, my love, that is why. Sophia thought about it for a moment. Then she said something beautiful. Then Grandpa is very good. Richard looked at me with tears in his eyes. Yes, daughter, Grandpa is the best man I know. That night, after everyone left, I stayed alone in my house. I walked through every room, remembering. The living room where Mary and I watched movies. The dining room where we celebrated so many Christmases. The study where I built my empire. The garden where I played with Richard when he was a boy. And now, where I played with Sophia and Valentina, I sat in my favorite armchair. I closed my eyes. We did it, Mary. Against all odds, we did it. I thought of all the road traveled, from that horrible day at Richard's house, when I heard in Russian how they planned to strip me. To this day, seeing my granddaughters grow surrounded by love, it had been a long road, painful, full of obstacles, but it had been worth it. Because in the end, it is not about how much money you have, or how many properties you own, or how much power you accumulate. It is about the people you love, about the lessons you leave, about the legacy you build, and I had built something more valuable than any building. I had built a united family, a family that had survived betrayal, pain, loss, and that had come out stronger on the other side. Months kept passing. My health started to decline a bit. Nothing serious, but 75 years make themselves felt. Doctors told me I had to slow down, stop working completely, enjoy my last years. Richard worried a lot when he found out. Dad, You have to take care of yourself. I am doing it. No, you are not. You keep going to the company. You keep reviewing contracts. You have to rest. I cannot rest, son. If I rest, I rust, Laura intervened. Mr. Miller, the girls need you. We need you, please. Finally, I accepted. I retired completely. I gave Richard total control of the company, not only as director, but as majority owner. I transferred my shares, my assets, everything. Dad, you do not have to do this. Yes, I have to do it. It is time for this company to be completely yours, for you to make your own decisions, for you to make your own mistakes, and for you to build your own legacy. And you? I am going to enjoy my granddaughters. I am going to read the books I never read. I am going to travel to places I never visited. I am going to live, and that I did. The following months were the happiest of my life. I took the twins to the park. I taught them to ride a bicycle. I took them to the movies. I bought them ice cream. I did all the things I did not do with Richard, because I was too busy working. And in those moments, seeing their smiles, hearing their laughter, I felt I had finally found the meaning of everything. One day, while the twins played in my garden, Richard sat next to me. Dad, there is something I have never asked you. What? Did you ever really forgive me? I mean, I know you said yes, but deep down, did you really do it? I looked him straight in the eyes. Richard, forgiveness is not something that happens once. It is something you choose every day. There were days where it cost me, where I remembered what you said in Russian and felt pain. But there were also days where I saw you with your daughters and felt proud. And little by little, the good days outnumbered the bad ones. And now, when I think of everything we went through, I do not feel pain. I feel gratitude. Gratitude? Yes, because that experience taught us something invaluable, that true love survives anything, even betrayal. Richard wiped a tear. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. We hugged. Long, strong, like two men who have fought battles together and have come out victorious. One afternoon, 3 years after my complete retirement, I was in my house reading when the doorbell rang. I opened. It was a courier with a large envelope. Mr. Robert Miller? Yes. I have a delivery for you. I signed and took the envelope. It was heavy, official. I opened it. Inside was an invitation from the Chamber of Commerce. They invited me to a special ceremony where they would give me a recognition for my business trajectory and my contribution to the city's development. I stood looking at the invitation, feeling a mix of emotions. I had worked 50 years to build my company. I had sacrificed so much. And now, at the end, they recognized me. I called Richard to tell him, Dad, that is incredible. You have to go. I don't know. I am already old for those ceremonies. It is not for you. It is for us, for the girls, so they see what you built, so they understand where they come from. He was right. The day of the ceremony, I put on my best suit, the same one I used at Richard and Laura's wedding. Richard, Laura, and the twins accompanied me. The hall was full. Businessmen, politicians, lifelong colleagues, everyone there to celebrate successful careers. When they said my name, I stood up. I walked towards the stage. My legs trembled a little, but my mind was clear. The president of the chamber read my biography. He spoke of my beginnings, of the buildings I built, of the jobs I generated, of the families I helped. And when he finished, he handed me a plaque, heavy, of crystal, with my name engraved. Mr. Robert Miller, for 50 years of business excellence and commitment to the city. The room exploded in applause. I looked towards where my family was. Richard applauded with pride. Laura smiled. Sophia and Valentina shouted, Grandpa, with emotion. I approached the microphone. Good evening. First of all, I want to thank you for this recognition. It is an honor to be here. I paused, looking at everyone present. But I have to confess something to you. For many years I thought success was measured in money, in properties, in power, and I worked tirelessly to accumulate all that. I looked at Richard, but in the process, I almost lost the most important thing, my family. I told the story, not all the details, but enough. I spoke of how work distanced me from Mary, of how I almost lost Richard, of how I had to learn at 70 years old what really mattered. So this recognition is not only mine. It belongs to my son Richard, who learned from my mistakes and became a better man than I was. It belongs to my daughter-in-law, Laura, who taught him the true meaning of family. And it belongs to my granddaughters, Sophia and Valentina, who remind me every day why it is worth living. The applause was louder this time. I saw several people wiping their eyes. If there is something I can leave you tonight, it is this. Build empires, yes, but do not forget to build families. Accumulate wealth, yes, but do not forget to accumulate moments. Because in the end, the only thing we take are the memories and the love we leave behind. I went down from the stage. Richard waited for me at the foot of the stairs. He hugged me. I am so proud of you, Dad. I of you, son. That night, back in my house, I put the plaque in my study, next to Mary's photo, next to Richard's photos, next to the drawings Sophia and Valentina had given me, and for the first time in many years, I felt complete. 5 years have passed since that ceremony. Now I am 80 years old. My health is no longer the same. I walk slower, I get tired faster, but my mind remains clear, and my heart remains full. Sophia and Valentina are now 13 years old. They are no longer the little girls running through my garden. Now they are teenagers, intelligent, beautiful, with their own dreams. Sophia wants to be an architect, like her grandfather, she says. Valentina wants to be a writer, to tell stories, she says. Both visit me every week. They tell me about school, about their friends, about their problems. And I listen to them, with patience, with love, with the wisdom that 8 decades of life give. Richard is no longer the insecure young man I knew. He is a complete man, a respected businessman, a present father, a loving husband. The company keeps growing. Now they have projects all over the country. He has taken my legacy beyond what I imagined. But the most important thing is he is happy. Laura and he are still in love. I see them together, and I remember how Mary and I were at the beginning, before work consumed me. I am glad he learned what cost me so much time to understand. Sometimes, at night, when I am alone in my house, I think about everything that happened. About Elena, about the betrayal, about the pain, and I no longer feel rage, nor resentment. I only feel peace, because I understand now that everything had a purpose, that every pain was a lesson, that every loss was a gain in disguise. If Elena had not arrived, Richard never would have matured. If I had not learned Russian, I never would have discovered the truth. If we had not gone through that crisis, we never would have built this strong family we have now. Everything made sense. Everything was necessary. Today is Sunday, my favorite day. Richard, Laura, and the twins come to eat, like every week. I am in the garden, under the walnut tree, waiting for them. I hear the car arrive, the voices, the laughter. Grandpa! Sophia and Valentina run towards me. They hug me with that strength only youth has. Hello, my loves. Grandpa, will you tell us another story? Which one do you want to hear? The one about when you learned Russian in secret? I laugh. That story again? Yes, it is the best. Richard and Laura approach. They sit next to me. Okay, I tell you the story. But afterwards you tell me how school went this week. Deal. I start telling. The twins listen with attention. Richard looks at me with pride. Laura smiles. And while I tell, while I see their faces, while I feel the afternoon sun on my face, I think of something Mary used to tell me. Robert, life is not measured in the years you live. It is measured in the moments that take your breath away. And this is one of those moments. A quiet Sunday. A united family. A love that survived everything. This is what I built. This is my true legacy. Not the buildings, not the money, not the properties, but this. A family that loves each other, that forgives each other, that takes care of each other. And when my moment comes to go, I know I will leave in peace, knowing that I left something more valuable than any fortune. I left love. Life teaches you that the truth always comes to light, that secrets do not last forever, that lies have short legs, but it also teaches you that forgiveness is possible, that families can be rebuilt, that it is never too late to start again. I learned Russian to not feel invisible, and that knowledge saved me from a betrayal. But the most important thing I learned did not come from any book. It came from pain, from experience, from life. I learned that true love forgives, that pride is worth nothing if you lose your family, that success means nothing if you are alone, and I learned that sometimes the worst moments of your life are the ones that lead you to the best. Because without that betrayal, Richard never would have woken up. Without that pain, I never would have learned to value what I had. Without that crisis, this family would not exist as it exists today. So, if I could turn back time, would I change anything? No. Because everything, absolutely everything, brought me here. To this garden. With my granddaughters, with my son, with my family. And I would not change this for anything in the world. If you are listening to this story and are going through something similar, I want you to know something. You are not alone. Families are complicated. Children make mistakes. Parents too. But if there is love, there is always hope. Do not give up. Do not close your heart. Do not let pride distance you from the people you love. Because life is short, and in the end, the only thing that matters is the love you gave and the love you received. I am 80 years old. I do not know how much time I have left, but I know that when my time comes, I will close my eyes with a smile, because I lived, I loved, I forgave, and that is more than what many can say. So if my story moved you, if it made you reflect, if it reminded you of what really matters, then it was worth telling it. Take care of your family, forgive mistakes, seek the truth, and above all, never stop fighting for the people you love. Because in the end, that is the only thing that counts. That is the only thing that remains. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for allowing me to share these lessons with you. May God bless you, and may you never lack the love of a united family. Farewell, Robert Miller.